Today's guest is Eric Helitzer. He's the founder and CEO of SubBase. Eric, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Tats, for having me.
Awesome. I always like entrepreneurial stories. What was your initial background in construction?
Yeah, so my initial background is actually studying construction management. So I was one of the few who, when I graduated high school, I went to college at the University of Florida, and they have a construction management program that was pretty well known. So I did my bachelor's and master's at that school, and the school is called the Rinker School of Construction Management, and graduated with a degree in construction. And this was at the tail end of the condo boom in Miami. So had a foothold into the Miami market and studied construction for 5 years.
Yeah. What are the key pieces of that sort of the bachelor's, and I guess you got a master's as well?
Yes. So bachelor's was just a general construction management degree, really learning, about construction management in general. The most helpful piece was every summer we were interning. So that's really where you got to learn was right from the program, you're pretty much hooked up with a phenomenal internship in the field. And so did that for a couple of years. And then I stayed an extra year to get a degree in sustainable construction practices and really learn about the efficiencies of building green and the net zero energy effects of how you can construct buildings in that way, and wound up working in the specialty trade space right after that. So those were the two degrees I got from that school.
Yeah, yeah. You're Baker and another firm.
Yeah,
What'd you learn from those? Those are fairly, would it be fair to say, like mid-size, fairly established organizations?
yeah. Baker at the time was still the largest, and still is the largest
Okay.
concrete specialty trade contractor. Um, that was phenomenal because I got to learn the trade of concrete construction, which is typically the critical path driver on any new construction project, a lot of different systems. And I really got to learn, the intricacies of building a structure. The family business that was the GC I worked for after pretty much forced me into the field and made sure that I got my learnings from the specialty trade world before I was able to jump into the general contracting world, which I did. So that learning starting out in the field was probably the biggest career. It was probably the best career move I made out of school was going into the specialty trade first.
Yeah, specialty trade, you're out in the field. What were you learning in the field for the second the GC?
So on the GC side, I was really operations heavy, project management. I didn't get as much of that on the specialty trade side. On the specialty trade, I was more pre-construction and really, really project engineer in the field, but it was kind of a hybrid. On the GC side, it was project management based, managing those subs and starting to learn the new technologies that were coming out in the space to actually manage um, you know, those projects. Learned a lot about communication and building the right team because as a GC, we subbed everything out. So we were working typically with 16 to 20 specialty trades on a job and learning how to manage each trade and conducting each trade. And that was the biggest learning jump versus in concrete. It was we mastered that trade, and really your blinders are on because you know what you need to do for that division. Versus on the GC side, we had to overlook a bunch of different trades commingling together to make sure the project was successful.
Yeah. And how do you get involved on the entrepreneurial side?
So it started really in 2014 when I went to the GC side. This is at the time where Procore was starting to become prevalent in the GC space. And one of the owners of the company I was at wanted to take a bet that Procore would help us grow as far as managing projects. So I was the first one to get into Procore at that company. Really saw the iteration from manual-based workflows to paper-based workflows to a digitized workflow where we were managing submittals and RFIs. One thing led to another. People saw that we were adopters, early adopters of technology and construction. So we got to see a lot of different, you know, products that we were using. Post COVID, though, I had a family friend who was interested in moving into the construction tech space from Silicon Valley, and he wanted to break into the materials management space. I had a really, really keen interest there because we were doing it every day with our subcontractors. I had previously been involved in that workflow, and we had an opportunity to build together. Really, really early on, while I was on the GC side, we were building with our subs in the field, and that was really the tipping point. But it didn't really occur until a couple months after that we had an opportunity to take this to the next level, and that's when I took the leap of faith, and left the original business to start what is now SubBase. We started it literally from the ground up with a single user and a single order moving through the platform. Gave us enough conviction to bring on the right team to continue to build, and that's kind of the rest is really history, is what they say.
Yeah. Oh, um, are there other softwares in the area or, overlap? I mean, obviously you're making this because, you're trying to like put your value proposition in. What's the difference between what you're doing and what's out there, what's commonly
Yeah.
done?
So what we realized, like the most common, I guess, piece of software that was out there that we always noticed was, email, text messages, pen and paper, if you want to consider that software, if you scan it into a computer, and Excel spreadsheets, which are great for certain aspects. What we did was we allowed there to be the same workflows in a much easier interface to connect many different parties in the most construction specific way. There's many different ERPs out there, accounting systems, right, that actually can create material orders, can reconcile an invoice, but to do it at the trade specific level and to give the field the same tool to connect to a vendor and to connect to the office didn't really exist. And so our value prop was, we're construction guys that really understood the problems and the workflows. How do we build a product that speaks the same language without totally breaking the way that things have always been done? And so we give the flexibility that you would want in an Excel for the most part, and we give the industry specific workflows that you don't have in those specific cases to take everything under one umbrella. That's really our value prop.
Yeah. And the industry specific workflows from whose point of view? A general contractor, special
Specialty trade. So we
specialty.
do very well at the specialty trade area, or a self-performing GC. So a GC that's self-performing certain trades is doing very well inside the platform, and we connect with all their vendors. So material suppliers are in SubBase as well, interacting, and we have a lot going on for vendors
Got
as
it.
well to digitize.
Because the GC might not be, handling the materials movement and stuff like that,
Right.
because they may be dealing with, the company directly in terms of objectives. So basically, the nuts and bolts, the complications can happen at the specialty trade level. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. And most GCs, unless you're self-performing, they're not managing the chaos of material management. They're managing the subcontractor level who manages the materials. So we get down and dirty to that material level, and that's why we have a very specific focus on specialty trades and self-performing GCs that can actually manage in-house those trades.
Got it. What has been your sort of challenges at getting up and running?
Um, so the challenge of getting up and running, really with let's call it prospects, right, is the mentality of, hey, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And education, because most people realize that, hey, like, it's working, but they don't realize the cost and the time that it's taking to actually manually process orders and reconcile invoices and the data they're missing out on until we educate them. So our biggest, I would say, challenge right now is educating companies that have been around for years who do a lot of volume that there is a better solution versus what they're using today, and recognizing that there is a problem, and that even though you may think it's not broken, um, that there's a problem to be fixed, and there's a lot more money to be made. That's the biggest problem, is the education that we're, yeah, teaching as far as who we go and offer our services to.
Yeah, and is there a particular person that moves the needle on, trying this out, or as a big thing or a small thing? Like, is there whose best interest is it within the organization?
That's a tough one to pinpoint one person, because in the material management workflow, there's multiple people that touch a specific material. You have your field operations, potentially superintendents, project managers. If you centralize purchasing, you have a purchasing manager, and then you have your accounting teams controllers, CFOs, accounting admins who are touching it as well. Then you have your owner who really wants to drive bottom line savings and see numbers. So we typically sell to a variety of stakeholders, but it usually starts at the top. It starts with an owner, it starts with a C-suite or an executive that says, listen, we really want to grow the business. We're having a really tough time finding people to just grow. How can we institute the right standards, the right processes, the right technology to enhance today what we're doing, but also allow ourselves to grow without having to layer on so many headcount? That's really the value prop for an owner who wants to grow. And then as you go into the workflow chain, right, purchasing managers or project managers that are ordering materials want to see visibility without having to manually type Excels all day. Invoice reconciliation should be happening in almost an autonomous way so that when the invoices come into a system like SubBase and they pair against a PO, we can quickly check to see if is this right or is this wrong. And then moving that into an accounting system, we can remove a lot of hours a week of manual data entry to get that information from point A to point B. And that's really where a lot of the value prop is, depending on the stakeholder who's involved.
Yeah. Um, the prospects mainly referrals, sort of
Hmm.
one-to-one research, and or do you do other things as well?
Our business is very heavy network referrals, very relationship based. We have referrals coming in from, peer groups who are, companies that are using our software that just see a lot of ROI and love using it and telling their friends about it and their peers. We have a network of, you know, early industry adopters who saw the inception of SubBase and now are telling everyone how we've grown and what are we doing to help them. We have a lot of events that we go to. We like to educate and like to speak about it because I think it's important that people understand that material management is a big, big bottom line driver for these businesses. And a lot of people, until you talk to them about how they're doing it, they won't admit they have a problem until you really back into how much time and dollars is costing you to actually manage a large piece of your business. And so we do a lot of speaking, and that's where we get a lot more attention to.
Yeah, makes sense. Very cool. First, I think you're a first-time entrepreneur. What have you learned through your process?
Ooh, I'm a first time entrepreneur. So I've learned a lot. So the first thing that I learned that if I had to do it all over again, and I've told this multiple times, was we would have charged earlier for our product, which we didn't in the first year and a half. We did not charge. And the reason we didn't charge was because we wanted to validate that we could get people to not just use the software, but continuously repeat and be able to grow within it. It was great because it was like, okay, there's not as much friction. Sometimes price in construction with software, right? You have to really show the ROI if you want to sell certain size software packages in construction, specifically to subcontractors. So when you started charging, and this is something that we learned, was then you start getting real feedback.
Yes.
When people start actually paying for your software and they pay, money for something that they're expecting performs amazing, you're going to know. You're going to know every little bit of detail, and that type of detail and response has actually allowed our customers to be ingrained in the system, giving us better feedback. And everyone has a stake in the betterment of the product and of the service we're providing. Where when you were given away for free, it's free. So therefore, like it may not be worth the value, or I may not need it because, hey, I don't see as much value here. So charging way earlier is something that we would have done different, and I would have done different. That would one, and then the other thing is the education piece. When we first started getting SubBase in the hands of users, right, we knew who would be the right profile, but we didn't really know at what point does the education like need to be presented for bigger companies that don't really have an idea of how much cost and time and money they're spending on this process. So we would double down on early education up front to really show show the cost from point A to point B of what it's costing you today to manage your materials in a very, very outdated process.
Hmm.
So
So
those
that's
would be the
some
two.
sort of presentation format you created to help
Yeah, well,
people.
yeah, it's actually a presentation, but it's also like we'll walk through an ROI and we will sit there for with the team for almost an hour and let the team walk and talk and iterate on their process. Tell me
Hmm.
about the process and let's put a dollar value to this. How much time is it taking to do this? What could you be doing elsewhere? So it's a very value oriented um, sale process. But when you sit down an owner or an executive and you actually walk them through the process of how they're managing materials today, you can actually see the dollars that are being wasted and the amount of time being spent. And that's what we would have done a lot earlier in the process as we were building SubBase.
Yeah. No, well said. I love it. How do you see this thing growing?
Yeah, so we right now are obviously very ingrained in the subcontractor workflow, touching a lot of vendors, material suppliers. We have a lot of new functionality for subcontractors coming up, but ultimately the way that we see SubBase being a player in the entire material space is really getting deeper into the vendor workflows. And what I mean by that is a lot of vendors are still managing their customers with email, text, phone call, spreadsheets, which is fine. But it gets to a certain point where these customers now that can see the technology of SubBase and the subcontractor side are expecting more. They want faster response times. They want better analytics as far as maybe what can they be buying at better prices, or maybe what can they be buying in bulk, knowing they have multiple jobs coming down the road, and giving the two a better platform to sell more on. We want to drive a lot more sales because we believe that there's a really big efficiency lag what's happening today in the materials management space because everything is being done so manual. And on the vendor side, there's not enough resources out there to sell more product and really get product into more hands of more users as far as subcontractors. So we are taking a very big look at the overall ecosystem because no matter what you're buying, a box of nails to 10,000 yards of concrete, there is someone on the other side of the platform or in the market that is you're buying from, and it's very, very relationship heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's very, very relationship heavy, and if you have the information present, then you can have a more good discussion on it. Like you said,
Yeah,
I think there's the historical pricing. When's the last time we chatted? Everything can come together in one place
yeah.
and speed up that process.
And it's not always about price. There's companies that, just need material now, and if they can't get a fast response or a confirmation, that's a problem. And some companies are willing to pay more to have it and guarantee that, hey, I'm going to have this on site by tomorrow, because if I don't have this, box of snap ties to close up my forms, I may not be pouring, which is going to affect my schedule, which is going to lead to much bigger causes than me paying a little bit more for service that is guaranteed to get me there to the job site.
Got it. Internal operations connected to field operations.
Exactly.
Hmm, very cool. What in construction? I mean, there's lots of like you said, it's relational based relationships and sort of developing those. But how do you stay in touch with the construction industry? Like, what sort of resources or where do you go? You said you go to
Yeah.
events and stuff
Yeah.
like that. What's your go-to?
So we do a lot of events. We do a lot of reading. We read a lot of different articles, not just in the construction space, but in just the general, general business space. But really, where we get our home, let's call it our intelligence, is from our customers and from our users. Like we are ingrained in their workflows, in their businesses. We're making not just calls about the business, but calls about how they envision like the future of their business. What's their backlog looking like? And we really go the extra mile to make sure that we are in tune with not just how the customer is using SubBase today, but where's the industry going and how can we adapt to that? So the biggest source of information is coming directly from those that are inside the platform today, and obviously listen to a lot of podcasts, but more so, getting that real raw feedback from the current users on the state of the market. That's really the best ear to the ground that we have.
Yeah, and I know, sometimes you can get feedback from asking simple questions. I guess you're coming from the software side. I guess was it the mom test type
Yeah, the
of
mom
thing,
test. It's a great book.
site. So I mean, walk me through how the insight piece always fascinates me because that's a piece that's a little bit harder to do. Like, what sort of things you do to get insight versus a customer that may not know what they want in the future or something
hmm
that you can't present to them.
So we typically tend to go pretty deep when it comes to um, doing our homework with users who are inside the platform today, and we'll look at the data on how they're using certain products. So the data can speak pretty, pretty, pretty good as far as like, are we solving a problem for you? And if we don't see that there's enough conviction on what we're looking at from a data perspective, we'll know that hey, maybe we're not solving the problem. If that's the case, um, we will go in person and we will have conversations with with those prospects or those users, and we'll go pretty deep to try to peel back the onion to get to the problem. And a lot of times, it really takes, not really an interview, but it takes really deep learning and conversations, and even takes the point where we'll go and sit and watch how certain prospects or certain users or early adopters are using the system. We want to physically watch how they're using it, because if we can see how they've used it or trying to use it, we can then come up with a solution to either guide the future of the roadmap or make the product better today from just a feature that's been rolled out. I would say that the biggest thing that we've learned is that we're not afraid to ask a lot of questions, right? When someone comes and says they need something, it would be great to do this inside of SubBase, we don't just say, okay, great, we'll go deeper. Some people don't like that because they feel like, oh, why are you questioning us? But we're doing this so that we can make sure that when we put the resources behind it, that we're going to build something that's actually solving a problem, and solving a problem for the masses of who would be using it versus just a single source user.
Sure.
But it's a lot of conversations.
Yeah. I mean, what's the key to ask good questions that sort of pull out some of these details? What are some tips for people that want to get better?
Yeah, do a lot more listening than even asking. Having a conversation with people who are either interested in the software or using the software, um, and you let them speak, you can really start to get, and they will almost walk you into the pain, and they'll almost walk you into where you need to be. Something I learned, because, and I still do it today, is I'm very charged up about what we're building. And so I tend to be very excited about talking about the product, peeling it back and really letting them talk through their problems or talk through the way they're doing the process today. And then you can start to get some tidbits on where the problems lie, is probably the best key that I can say, is listen more than you do talking.
Yeah. And sometimes at some point you get the rapport and the real complaints come up with things that they find not intuitive or difficult.
Yeah. And you can find difficult or non-intuitive aspects of the product when you watch someone use it. So if you can watch someone use the product, you can see exactly where they stumble. We like to do that a lot. Most of our implementation is being done where we will show someone how to do it. We'll watch them do it, and then we'll watch them do it again to see where they struggle. And then all that feedback goes back to our product team to enhance constantly.
Very cool. All right. What else? I mean, is there anything that I haven't asked you but you wanted to share?
No, look, I think it's a interesting time in the construction tech space. At the specialty trade world, at that level, a lot of people that don't come from the industry um, find it difficult to understand, where the problems are and how to get these, what I would say, very large and very smart specialty trade contractors to adopt technology. It's a very slow moving industry, but I think when you find the right people that are looking to solve the right problems, things can happen pretty quickly. So that's really what we're looking to do, is educate and really show the numbers on what it costs people to manage a very, very, very manual process in their business today, is really exciting to share.